Once word of Duke Terran's wedding slipped from a single person's lips, it spread like wildfire through high society. Not a single person had attended the ceremony, so curiosity and gossip quickly filled the vacuum. Shock turned into frenzy, and speculation grew rampant. Among those most taken aback was Crown Prince Hesse. Enraged and bewildered, he flung aside a document in front of him. "What in the world? She couldn't have just dropped out of the sky," he muttered in disbelief, clutching his head. A princess, who had suddenly become duchess. The prince wasted no time beginning an investigation into this mysterious woman, but the deeper he dug, the less he seemed to find. Her name and her age, that was the full extent of the official records. Nothing more substantial appeared, not even in the places he expected to uncover scandal or forgotten history. All he had to work with were vague descriptions of her appearance, whispered by the maids who once worked at the small, neglected palace where she resided before her sudden marriage. How troublesome, Prince Hesse thought, his pride stung. I've always prided myself on my network, my skill at gathering information, but this time nothing. Nothing at all. The Royal Intelligence Department widened the scope of their investigation, zeroing in on the palace where Princess Vivian, Lucia's identity and name, had been raised. What they uncovered shocked them. Records there had been deliberately falsified for years. The female administrators responsible for the forgeries were exposed and punished harshly for their crimes. Yet, even with these revelations, the investigation yielded little about Lucia's true past. The only consistent detail that surfaced was that she had lived like a commoner before ever entering the palace. I even sent men to investigate the town where her mother once lived, Hesse reflected bitterly. But even those who knew her mother, those closest to her, could not offer anything of worth about either woman. After months of fruitless searching, the prince finally came across a letter. It was one that Lucia's mother had written to the palace before her death. Eagerly, he unfolded it and read, "On that day, I slept in one bed with the king and gave birth to the princess." With a frustrated snarl, Hesse tossed the letter away. This tells me nothing but that they were lovers, not a hint of who she truly was. His mind churned with speculation. Could her mother have been a commoner? He slumped back into his chair, considering the possibility with a frown. Then he shook his head. No, that old man, he might have seemed indulgent, but he had particular tastes. Even in his depravity, he wouldn't have chosen just anyone. His gaze turned toward a man standing nearby. "Sir Croton," he said sharply. "Are you certain you know nothing?" Roy Croton, one of Duke Hugo's closest subordinates, only smirked. "I know nothing, and even if I did," he added with a low laugh, "I wouldn't tell you." Hesse gave a humorless smile. "That mouth of yours is hopeless, but I suppose that insolence is also what makes you, you." Still, the prince's curiosity gnawed at him. He slammed his fist on the armrest. "I don't need her entire life story. I just want to know how they met. That's all. They have nothing in common, not a single point of connection. If I don't find out, I'll die of curiosity." Across from him, Roy's smirk lingered. He, of all people, knew the truth of how they met, but he wasn't about to share it. Elsewhere in her own manor, Countess Falcon was consumed by fury. She hurled a chair across the room, its legs scraping harshly against the floor as she stormed about in a rage. The news of Duke Terran's marriage had struck her like a dagger. "Why?" she screamed, her chest heaving. Many women mourned when they heard the news, their hearts broken by the thought of the cold and untouchable Duke belonging to someone else. But Countess Falcon was different. Always different. She had already been married 3 times, had no illusions of being the Duke's bride, and had never once dreamed of securing him through marriage. She was content, she told herself, with being his lover, one of the select few he would visit when it suited him. She remembered vividly the moment she first heard the gossip. "Did you hear? Duke Terran is getting married," one lady whispered to another. "I was heartbroken when I heard the news," the other replied sorrowfully. Standing nearby, Countess Falcon had frozen. Married? Him? Shock coursed through her, but it quickly shifted into smug self-assurance. He'll come back to me. Once he grows bored of his new bride, he'll return. He always does. She pitied the new Duchess and the other women alike. None of them, she thought, could compare to her. None of them had known what it meant to be Duke Terran's chosen companion. She was convinced she was irreplaceable. But then came the bouquet of yellow roses. When she first saw them, her hands trembled. She stared at the bright flowers in disbelief. Why? Why would he send me these? Her mind raced. She had been discreet, silent since the wedding, careful not to gossip or stir trouble. She had never been careless, never exposed their relationship. And yet, she knew what the roses meant. They always carried one message: the end. Duke Taran had never once returned to a woman who received yellow roses. "Is this it?" she whispered, panic setting in. "No," she screamed suddenly, throwing the flowers aside. "This isn't like him. He's never cared about clean breaks or clean consciences. This isn't his doing. It's her." That woman, Princess Vivian. Her thoughts spiraled. She must have discovered us. She must have pressured him, forced him to cut ties. Yes, that's it. It has to be. She bit at her finger, consumed by the thought. He doesn't have feelings for anyone. He never has. He wouldn't end it on his own. Her fury sharpened into obsession. "I must learn more about her," she vowed, her voice shaking. "I will not, cannot, be cast aside." Far from her raging despair, elsewhere in the kingdom, a carriage waited. A man stood before it, greeting its young passenger. "Oh, I'm Ashen, the administrative secretary. Do you remember me, young master?" he asked with a genial smile, addressing Damian, heir to House Taran. The carriage rattled steadily as it made its way back toward the north. Inside, the air was heavy with silence. Secretary Ashen sat stiffly, his gaze wandering outside the window, though his attention often returned to the boy seated across from him. Damian sat there quietly, his face turned toward the window, looking outward but seemingly lost in thought. Ashen sighed inwardly. "Just my luck. It's going to be this quiet all the way to Roham." He cleared his throat, trying to break the stillness, and spoke in a friendly tone. "I hope you've been well. You've grown so much that I almost didn't recognize you." Damian turned his eyes to Ashen briefly, studying him without a word, then returned his gaze to the passing scenery. Ashen's smile faltered. That attitude, it really does run in the family. Cold, detached, just like his father. The resemblance isn't only in his appearance, but in his aura too. There won't be any need to confirm his legitimacy with a magical artifact, Ashen thought, stealing a glance at Damian's composed figure. But what kind of 8-year-old behaved this way? Damian's presence alone made him seem much older. My cousin is about to turn 10, but even he's smaller and less mature than Damian. For Damian to grow into the same towering figure as Duke Taran, maybe children of that bloodline really are something else. Maybe they aren't quite like the rest of us, Ashen mused, almost unnerved. Suddenly, Damian turned his eyes back to him, sharp and unwavering. Ashen flinched under the boy's calm yet piercing stare. "What's the occasion?" Damian asked evenly. "Pardon?" Ashen replied, feeling the weight of the boy's gaze. "Someone of your position isn't exactly suited to escort me," Damian remarked bluntly. Ashen blinked, momentarily at a loss. His mouth opened and closed before he managed a laugh to ease the tension. "That's true. I'm not the right person for this sort of duty. But still, that's not exactly the kind of thing an 8-year-old should be pointing out." Still, he was unsettled. He remembers me, sure, but to recognize my position so clearly, he's sharper than I expected. Ashen's thoughts wandered. The Taran family always stood apart from others. Duke Taran himself was the perfect example, strength and intellect combined in a way that seemed almost unreal. Ashen had once believed such qualities belonged only to fictional heroes, but the Duke had proven him wrong. It almost feels unfair to say such ability runs in their blood, but the truth is, that's exactly how it looks. And the world is unfair anyway. Well, it was the Duke's order. Ashen finally explained. Damian's gaze lingered on him, his face unreadable, though the faint twitch of his expression suggested a question. Why would the Duke bother with this? Ashen cleared his throat again. "I'm sure you've heard the news. The Duke recently married. He has welcomed the new Duchess into the family." "Oh," Damian murmured softly, as though the information were not new to him. Indeed, it wasn't. Though Damian lived in a secluded boarding school, the Duke had always ensured he received detailed reports about the household. It was a strict requirement. As the future heir, Damian had to know everything, and ignorance would never be an excuse. Each time a report arrived, Damian memorized it thoroughly. He had known of the wedding long before Ashen mentioned it. This is just my opinion, Ashen went on with a small smile, but I think the Duke wanted you and the Duchess to get to know each other. After all, you're mother and son now. Mother and son? Damian echoed silently to himself, frowning inwardly. I gave him too much credit. If he truly believes that's the Duke's reasoning, then he doesn't understand his master at all. Ashen, however, was nearly breaking into a sweat. How can an 8-year-old exude this kind of pressure? He's just like the Duke. Damian's thoughts continued, sharp and detached. Father isn't the sort to care about fostering familial bonds. As long as no blood is spilled, he wouldn't concern himself if the Duchess and I despised one another. Did he say anything else? Damian asked. Ashen nodded. He did mention that you should not be rude to your mother. He said you must be polite. Of course. That's not advice. It's a warning. I know exactly what it means. Don't overstep. Don't speak out of turn. I know my place well enough. I'm illegitimate, and until I'm entered into the family register, I'm nothing more than an outsider. For that to happen, I'll need the Duchess's consent. Without it, I remain insignificant. Even without Father's warning, I never intended to clash with her. Is she pretty? Damian asked suddenly. Ashen blinked at the unexpected question. Oh, I haven't really had much chance to see her myself. Damian turned back toward the window, his face calm, though his thoughts were harsher. If she were beautiful, you'd have noticed at a glance. So, she must not be. Resigned, Damian reasoned with himself. It won't matter. All I need to do is greet her a few times in Roham. I'll keep to my room, stay out of sight, and avoid causing her displeasure. As long as she doesn't threaten my life, I can endure anything. The news of the marriage hadn't shocked him. His father only ever acted out of necessity, never whim. If he chose to wed, then it was for a reason. It won't endanger my position as heir. He may not be much of a father, but in matters of necessity, he can be trusted. It likely won't be more than a week, perhaps 3 at most. If I count the travel time, Damian calculated inwardly. At worst, I'll lose this semester's studies, but I'll accept that if I must. Still, I shouldn't waste time. If I fall behind, catching up will be my responsibility. Closing his eyes briefly, Damian braced himself, determined to be ready for whatever awaited him in Roham as the carriage continued its steady journey north. Meanwhile, far from the quiet tension of the carriage, Countess Falcon seethed in private. She gnawed at her nails, glaring down at a picture of Lucia, her face twisted with bitter anger as she dropped the image onto the table. Princess Vivian, she thought darkly, her eyes burning with hatred. Would you like me to add subtle connective narration, like atmospheric detail? Countess Falcon sat deep in her thoughts, her sharp gaze fixed on the portrait before her. The words slipped from her lips almost unconsciously. She's not exactly an extraordinary beauty, and she's certainly not his type. Her voice carried both scorn and doubt as she examined Lucia's delicate face. She had spent months quietly investigating the princess, combing through scraps of information until she finally uncovered a detail: Lucia's attendance at the victory party. That single revelation unsettled her deeply. How could a woman who had been confined for most of her life in a secluded side palace suddenly appear among the nobility at such a grand occasion? The question gnawed at her. Her suspicion grew sharper as she recalled the inquiries she had made in frustration. What about her dress? Her hair? Her makeup? None of it added up. Through whispered accounts and small discoveries, she pieced together an unsettling truth. Lucia had disguised herself as a maid more than once, slipping beyond the palace walls in secret. To Countess Falcon, this was no innocent or sheltered princess. This was a woman with daring habits, with knowledge of a world she should not have known. When she first saw Lucia's likeness, drawn from witnesses' descriptions, she had felt reassured. The girl looked plain enough, hardly a threat, but the longer she dwelled on it, the less at ease she became. She may not be his type, but perhaps that's exactly why he might take an interest in her, she thought bitterly. Tossing the picture aside, she leaned back in her chair, pressing a weary hand against her brow. It won't last. He will come back to me one day. It's a meaningless marriage anyway. He's a man who does not know how to love. Yet despite her words, doubt coiled in her chest. A restless thought followed. Should I go north to see her myself? The idea held a certain appeal. To see Lucia with her own eyes, to judge whether the girl was truly capable of keeping Duke Terran's attention. But the distance was daunting. By carriage, the journey would take months. To use a gate, she would need official approval, and that meant Hugo himself could discover her request. The risk made her shiver. No, better to wait. They will visit the capital eventually, she told herself, settling on patience, though unease lingered. Her mind returned to the princess's secretive outings. Why did Lucia disguise herself as a maid? What business had she outside the palace walls? Then a possibility struck her suddenly, chilling her to the bone before curling her lips into a sly smile. Did she have a lover? The notion felt almost too fitting. Yes, that must be it. A hidden romance, a secret affair. I need to know more, she resolved, her suspicion now burning into determination. Far away in Roham, Lucia herself sat in a quiet room, sharing tea with Jerome. "Did you enjoy riding your horse today, madam?" he asked warmly. "Yes, I did," Lucia answered, her voice soft but content. "Emily is such a good girl. She listens to me so well, even though I'm clumsy. Someone told me today that she's worth more than 10 of their horses." Jerome beamed at the praise, clearly proud of the horse he had raised. "Then Emily must be very expensive," Lucia added with a gentle laugh. "Yes, that is true," he confirmed, pleased with her appreciation. Lucia's heart warmed with pride. To be praised for the horse that Hugo had given her filled her with quiet happiness. She chuckled, her smile bright, though it soon faltered as her thoughts shifted elsewhere. Looking down at the table, her voice grew wistful. "When do you think he'll be back?" she asked. Jerome blinked, caught off guard. "Pardon? When will the Duke return?" she repeated. "Oh, I'm not certain. He could be gone for as long as a month," Jerome admitted, and even his face carried a shadow of gloom. "A month?" Lucia's surprise rang clear. She knew he had gone to attend to his domain, but curiosity pulled at her now more than before. "I understand he has business. But what exactly is it?" It was a question she had avoided in the past, keeping herself at a careful distance from his world. But now she longed to know more about the man she had married. Jerome answered with steady respect. "It is a yearly task for my master." Lucia leaned in, listening closely. "Across the northern border live the barbarians," Jerome continued. "They are divided into tribes without a single ruler. At times, they cross the border to raid and plunder. Each year, an expedition rides out to keep them in check, and as tradition demands, the head of House Taran leads them." "So he leaves around this same time every year?" Lucia asked, astonished. Jerome nodded. "For some years, because of the war, the master only sent his knights. That may be why the barbarians have grown bolder. They've increased their attacks in recent times." Lucia's brow furrowed. "Then the people of the north must live in constant fear." "Not quite," Jerome said with a faint smile. "Unless they live right along the border, most do not feel anxious. Their way of thinking is different from what outsiders imagine." Lucia nodded slowly, thoughtful. She lifted her cup, sipping in silence, until a sudden realization made her gasp. "Today? Isn't today his birthday?" Jerome startled, his own eyes widening. "Oh, how could I forget as well?" Lucia pressed a hand to her face, distraught. "I asked Jerome before Hugo left, so I wouldn't forget. But then, with our argument, I let it slip from my mind." Her chest tightened. "What do I do now?" "You should have told me sooner," she said almost desperately. "He's out there fighting barbarians without even celebrating his birthday." Her voice wavered close to tears. Jerome spoke gently, trying to ease her distress. "Your Grace, the master has never celebrated his birthday. In fact, he dislikes even acknowledging it." Lucia's eyes widened. "Why?" "I don't know the full reason," Jerome admitted with quiet sorrow. "But he has never wished to think of his birthday or his past." Lucia's heart ached at the thought. No good memories at all? How lonely. How sad. She compared it with her own life. Her childhood had been hard, but she still carried a few treasured moments, days spent with her mother before being taken into the palace. They had been poor, but she had been happy. Her thoughts turned, unbidden, to the story Jerome had once told her, the tragedy of the Western Tower. She had sworn not to think of it, nor to speak of it aloud, but each time she saw the looming tower, her mind returned to that horror. What truth drove his brother to such an act? She wondered, the question heavy, impossible to silence. What pain made him turn against his own blood? And in her heart, The mystery of Hugo's past deepened. Lucia looked at Jerome with quiet curiosity. "Jerome, you said you never saw the late Duke before he passed away, right?" she asked. "Yes," Jerome answered evenly. "I only served the master after he succeeded the household." Lucia's gaze softened, but her voice carried a certain weight. The late Duke must have been a very cold person. Jerome paused, his expression unreadable, before finally replying, "From what I have heard of him, he must have been exactly as you imagine." "I see," Lucia murmured, her mind drifting deep into thought. The Duke's past weighed heavily on her heart, dark and twisted, a life shadowed by tragedy. He never even knew his mother's face. She had died giving birth to him. His father abandoned him, making a calculated choice, casting aside the boy without hesitation. Then came the cruelest cut of all. His only brother slaughtered their family. By some strange twist of fate, he was spared, chosen not because of worth, but because of luck. Lucia thought bitterly. If he had been the one abandoned, perhaps he too would have ended up killing his own family. Her thoughts turned toward something Hugo once told her. House Terran rarely bore children. And yet, if children were so rare, shouldn't both twins have been cherished and protected? The more she considered it, the less sense it made. It's the same with Damian, she reflected. He, too, is a precious heir of a house where children are scarce. In the dream of her past life, she had never heard of Duke Terran having another child. Was that why he chose Damian as his successor? Because the chance of another child being born was slim? But then, if that were the case, why would he stand so firmly against her pregnancy? If having children was difficult, wouldn't the obvious answer be to try again and again, as much as possible? Her mind circled back to their argument, the memory of Hugo's words echoing painfully. He had said he didn't need a child, not to avoid political strife between heirs, not out of practicality, but with a chilling finality. When he spoke of traces, there had been something sharp beneath the words, a disgust she couldn't ignore. Then what about Damian? She wondered. Was he born against Hugo's wishes? Even if the child was unwanted, it was never Damian's fault for being alive. And yet, the Duke seemed indifferent, too detached, almost as if Damian wasn't truly his son at all. The thought struck her like a sudden blow, startling her into silence. What am I even thinking? She asked herself, shaken. Jerome's calm voice broke through her troubled reverie. Would you like some tea, madam? His offer was gentle, pulling her mind back to the present. Later that night, her maid came to her chamber carrying a small tray. Madam, it's time for your medicine. I'll leave it here. Lucia eyed the bottle. Anna had been relentless in her search for a cure, testing different remedies to ease her condition. The medicine was bitter, always bitter, but Lucia resolved to drink it faithfully. She lifted the glass and forced it down. Ah, it's so bitter, she muttered, grimacing, but not once did she waver. She would follow Anna's instructions. As she set the cup down, a memory from her dream tugged at her. The medicine's taste? It was peculiar, unique, and beneath the bitterness lingered a subtle note. Vanilla, she realized, her brows knitting. The next day, Lucia wandered through the castle. The sky was clear, the air crisp, and for the first time in a while, she let herself enjoy the simple pleasure of good weather. The sun is so warm. Maybe I should have gone horseback riding, she thought, smiling faintly to herself. Madam, a maid called, rushing toward her in a flurry, panting as she stopped. What is it? Lucia asked calmly, watching her maid's anxious expression. The young master? He has arrived, the girl managed between breaths. Lucia's eyes lit with interest, though she kept her composure. She followed the commotion outside, where the servants had already gathered. Damian had returned. Jerome stepped forward, his face warm with a rare smile. It's been a long time, young master. I hope you've been well. The journey must have been exhausting, he added, his voice carrying an easy, welcoming tone. Damian's sharp gaze swept over him, and nearby, Secretary Ashin flinched under the weight of it. The servants whispered, unsettled by Damian's presence. Except for Jerome, every face showed surprise and unease. Why is he suddenly here? Some of them wondered in silence. Damian seemed to take in everything, the atmosphere, the servants' eyes, before finally speaking. Long time no see. His voice was quiet, deliberate. Have you had lunch yet? Jerome asked, keeping things light. I'll have it later. The carriage was rough, and I'm not in the mood to eat just yet, Damian replied. Of course, young master. Then let me show you to your chamber so you can rest, Jerome offered, guiding him inside. But Damian suddenly halted. A presence drew his attention. He turned, eyes narrowing slightly. Lucia was there. She stood with her handmaidens, composed and silent, watching him. Damian's gaze locked onto hers. Sharp. Searching. She didn't flinch. She observed him just as intently, a quiet exchange passing between them without words. As the silence stretched between them, Damian spoke first. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Lucia," he saw his voice measured. Then, with a polite bow, he added, "Pardon me for my little introduction. I am Damian." Lucia studied him closely. The resemblance struck her immediately. It was undeniable. He looked almost exactly like the Duke. The difference lay only in his smaller frame and his youth. How can they look so alike, she thought, her eyes narrowing slightly. It's not just the red eyes. Apart from being younger and smaller, he's identical to the Duke. Her earlier suspicions resurfaced and now settled firmly in her mind. I knew it. My theory back then wasn't far-fetched. If they look this alike, then they must be father and son. Damian, noticing her silence, grew uneasy. He could almost hear the weight of her thoughts. She must be shocked, he reasoned. Of course, she just got married, and now she's faced with the existence of her husband's illegitimate child. It's only natural for her to be upset. His mind raced ahead, imagining her possible responses. What if she doesn't even know that I was announced as the official heir? How will she react? There are only a few options. 1, she'll just glare at me in shock. 2, she'll get angry and storm off. 3, she'll look down on me with contempt as though I'm something vile. 4, she'll slap me without warning. But instead, Lucia's voice was calm. "Oh, it's nice to meet you," she said, her tone composed. Damian blinked, surprised. What is this? Is she so stunned she can't even process the situation? I didn't expect this reaction at all. His past experiences at the academy had sharpened his instincts. He could usually tell when someone was being openly hostile or mocking. But this Duchess? She was different. She seemed capable of hiding her true feelings well. That's more troublesome, he thought warily, watching her expression. He remembered Ashen's hesitation when describing the Duchess's appearance. Seeing her now, Damian thought simply, she's pretty. Their moment was broken by Jerome's steady voice. Your Grace, the young master wishes to rest. He's been traveling for a long time. Lucia turned to him. Oh, of course. I know how exhausting a long trip can be. But it's lunchtime. What about your meal? She asked Damian kindly. I don't feel hungry, Damian answered politely. Her expression firmed. But then you'll have an empty stomach until dinner. You're still growing. That's bad for your health. Her words carried a sternness that startled Damian, though it was tempered by care. Turning to Jerome, she instructed, prepare a light meal that won't upset his stomach, and make sure the same is done for dinner. Yes, madam, Jerome said, bowing. This way, young master, Jerome continued, gesturing for Damian to follow. Damian bowed to Lucia before walking after Jerome. Lucia watched quietly as the boy left, her thoughts a whirlwind. Oh, dear goodness. He's so cute, she murmured inwardly. He's just like a miniature version of the Duke. His face, his blunt attitude, even that cold expression. It's like I'm seeing the childhood of the Duke, the part I never got to witness. Her heart fluttered strangely at the thought. Madam, Jerome called softly, trying to draw her back. She didn't answer. Madam? He tried again, noticing the dazed look on her face. Lucia turned to him suddenly, making him flinch. Jerome, he told me he's 8? Yes, he's naturally tall for his age. Jerome answered cautiously. I see. Well, it wouldn't make sense for the Duke's son to be short, she said simply. Jerome hesitated. Are you all right, madam? What do you mean? She asked evenly. Nothing, Jerome replied, uncertain. He's much cuter than I expected, and he seems like a nice boy, she added warmly. Jerome was taken aback. Pardon? He said, almost incredulous. Lord Damian? Cute? Perhaps when he was little. Yes, but not now. He frowned inwardly. And a nice boy? In what way? Isn't he exactly like the Duke? Both of them seemed to have cold blood running through their veins. I'm starting to question her eyesight. Lucia's mind wandered further. Would he be uncomfortable if I invited him to dinner? Jerome studied her with unease. As long as it's all right with you, madam. Of course it is. I'm looking forward to today's dinner, she said with a smile, turning away happily. Jerome, however, was left unsettled. Her reaction isn't normal. This should be a tragedy. She just got married, and now she's confronted with her husband's son. Does she not realize how serious this is? Maybe she can't process it properly because of shock. Poor Duchess, Jerome pity-clouding his expression. Not far away, Ashen was trying to slip away unnoticed. Sir Ashen, Jerome called suddenly, making him jump. I'd like a word with you, Jerome said, his lips curling into a calm but knowing smile. With me? Ashen stammered, his nerves showing as he trembled slightly. How did this happen? Why didn't you tell me that you were going to get the young master? Jerome demanded, his tone sharp as he confronted Ashen. Well, it was obviously because I thought you already knew, Ashen replied, turning his head away from Jerome's piercing gaze. Even if that's what you thought, you still should have reported it to me, or at the very least, to the Duchess beforehand. Jerome scolded, his voice full of restrained anger. That wasn't specifically a part of His Excellency's orders, so, Ashen began, but he was abruptly cut off. What? Do you really need His Excellency to spell out basic protocol for you? Jerome shot back furiously. It's not like he's still a novice. He clenched his fists, thinking to himself, is that really something an executive secretary should be saying? He can be so obstinate at the strangest times. The truth was simple. The Duke gave commands without always spelling out the details. He would make a decision, assign an order, and leave it at that. He never checked whether his subordinates properly communicated with one another, and if confusion arose from miscommunication, it was on them to bear the consequences. And today was no different. Everyone in the mansion had been thrown into disarray because of the young master's sudden and unexpected return. Jerome's glare bore into Ashen. Of course, the one most unsettled by all this was likely the Duchess herself, he thought grimly. Later that evening, Damian lay in bed, his gaze fixed on the open window of his room. A faint scent of flowers drifted in. The scent of flowers. Is this the Duchess's doing? He wondered. Lucia had tended the garden personally, and Damian could tell. I always thought vibrant flowers wouldn't suit this grim mansion, but they actually look fine, he admitted to himself. He had never imagined so many blossoms blooming here. For a long while, he went silent, simply letting his eyes rest on the beauty outside. I want to go down there and take a closer look, he decided inwardly. Soon, Damian found himself in the garden, walking slowly, his steps quiet. He leaned forward slightly, bringing himself closer to a flower. Damian, a gentle voice called. He turned. Lucia stood watching him with a smile. Damian stared at her silently before stepping toward her. Why does she look happy to see me? He wondered. Did you get some rest? She asked calmly. You woke up early? Aren't you hungry? Her voice was full of warmth, her smile affectionate. She's skilled, Damian thought, unsettled. I'm fine for now, he replied coldly. Lucia tilted her head, wondering at his answer. Did I disturb you? She asked gently. Not at all, Damian said quickly, turning his face away as his cheeks flushed red. This is awkward. I'm not used to speaking with a young woman who isn't a servant. He thought of his past. Damian had no memories of his mother, and at the academy, he had been surrounded only by male students and professors. I don't know how to act in front of the Duchess, he admitted inwardly. I was just thinking, the garden is very well tended to, Damian said, still not looking directly at her, trying to conceal his embarrassment. I simply planted a variety of flowers together, Lucia replied with a soft smile. But I'm happy to hear it looks all right, Lord Damian. Damian looked back at her. You don't have to be so formal with me, he said calmly. Oh, really? I don't mind either way, but would that be more comfortable for you? She asked shyly. Yes, Damian answered. All right, then. Her smile brightened. If you came out for a stroll, why don't we walk together for a little while? Damian watched her quietly, still trying to understand the warmth she showed him. Elsewhere, the palace was abuzz with its own concerns. Now that I think about it, Sir Croton, I heard you have a duel tomorrow, Prince Hess remarked as he walked alongside Roy. Yes, Roy answered simply. A count challenged you, right? Strange, isn't it? The prince said, his tone carrying mild amusement. How predictable, he thought inwardly. The count was a member of the rival faction, and since he wouldn't dare challenge the crown prince directly, he had instead picked a fight with Roy. I must thank Duke Tehran for sending him to me, Hess mused, his gaze shifting to the knight walking by his side. Should I go easy on him? Roy asked suddenly, catching the prince off guard. Is that supposed to be humor? Hess asked, smirking. Do you think a duel is simply a game? Don't worry about my honor. Fight as much as you like. Duke Terran guaranteed your skills, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing them. As you wish, Roy answered with a bow. That man, he didn't even dare to fight me himself, Roy thought coldly. He sends out one of his knights and yet makes such a fuss. His mind drifted back to earlier that day. How dare you insult me? I challenge you to a duel! Count Solon, a member of the rival party, had shouted, throwing down his glove in anger. Of course, a knight from my house will fight in my stead, Solon declared proudly. He'll teach you a lesson. He pointed to the knight standing at his side. What? All of a sudden? Roy's voice was cold, his sharp gaze startling the knight who had been offered up. Unfortunate. I'll be venting my anger on him, though it's his fault for choosing the wrong master. Resuming his walk beside the crown prince, Roy smirked inwardly. I even got permission. At first, I worried His Excellency would punish me if I stirred up trouble, but with the prince's approval, he won't step in. He won't stay to witness it anyway. His lips curled with a faintly sinister expression. Prince Hess noticed. He glanced sideways, catching that fleeting look before Roy forced a smile onto his face. He's obviously thinking something dangerous, Hess thought, a faint chill running through him. And so began the tale of the man who would later earn the infamous name Mad Dog Croton. Back in the garden, Damian remained silent, his presence steady but reserved. Lucia, however, could not help but marvel at him. Wow, they look alike, she thought as she studied his face, the striking resemblance to Duke Hugo impossible to ignore. The more she looked, the more astonishing it became. How can he resemble the Duke so much? Her cheeks flushed pink as she stole repeated glances at him, her heart fluttering in quiet awe. I think just looking at Damian will help me calm down whenever I start missing the Duke too much, she admitted inwardly, her gaze lingering on him. But her silent admiration did not last unnoticed. Damian suddenly turned, his eyes catching hers directly. Startled, Lucia flinched. Her heart raced. Was I staring too obviously? She panicked, forcing herself to speak cheerfully in an attempt to cover it up. I heard you're attending a boarding academy. Does that mean you're on vacation right now? She asked with a bright smile. Damian studied her without a word at first before replying with a calm, straightforward tone. We don't have vacations, but we are allowed to take leaves of absence. Even the way he spoke, polite, measured, and direct, was just like the Duke's. Even his manner of speech is the same. Lucia thought in amazement. Damian then added, I'm here because His Excellency told me to come. He said I should introduce myself to the Duchess. Lucia blinked at that. The Duchess? The way he addressed her was distant, deliberate. He was clearly drawing a line, and she felt it. Well, I suppose it would have been a little creepy if he had called me Mother right away, she admitted to herself with a nervous thought. Still, she couldn't deny how extraordinary he seemed. He's amazing, she thought inwardly, her eyes softening as they walked together. For a while, silence settled between them, but Lucia eventually stopped, halting their steps. Damian, she began gently, to be honest, it's difficult for me to accept you as a son right away. Her words startled him. His eyes widened slightly, tension flickering across his face. She's so direct. I didn't expect her to say something like this so openly, he thought, unsure of how to respond. Lucia continued carefully. It must be the same for you, right? It must be difficult to think of me as your mother. Damian's mind faltered. How should I answer her? He wondered, caught completely off guard. His lips parted slightly before he muttered almost in guilt. I'm sorry. I must have done something wrong. Lucia shook her head quickly. No, Damian. I'm not scolding you. I'm telling you it's normal to feel this way. We only met today, and we don't know each other well yet, so of course it feels unfamiliar. Damian blinked, confused. Why is she saying all this? He thought, unsettled by her warmth. But Lucia could see through him. His guarded look, the faint defensiveness in his demeanor, it only made him seem younger, more vulnerable. Oh, he's being defensive, she realized with a smile tugging at her lips. So cute. I want to pinch his cheeks. I want to ruffle his hair. The urge almost overcame her, but she restrained herself. No, if I do that, he'll only grow more wary of me. I have to stay calm. I'm the adult here, she reminded herself, suppressing her impulses. She cleared her throat to regain composure. Actually, she said softly, we only have an age difference of 10 years. Damian froze, startled by the remark. She's young, he thought quickly. Lucia let out a tense sigh, continuing, if you think about it, that would mean I'd have given birth to you when I was 10. That would make your father a criminal. Her voice turned cold and serious at the last words, her expression stiff. Damian flinched and turned his face away, trying to hide the embarrassment burning in him. His shoulders tightened, and though he looked like he wanted to laugh at the absurdity, he swallowed it down. Lucia, however, only watched him with warmth. He's still just a child at heart, she thought kindly. Then, smiling, she offered gently, so, let's just get to know each other more. You don't have to call me the Duchess. That's far too formal. You can call me by my name, Lucia. That's my childhood name. She extended her hand toward him, her smile bright and sincere. Let's get along, Damian. Damian froze, staring at her hand in surprise. His thoughts turned wary. Why is she doing something so unnecessary? Compared to the Duchess, I'm at a huge disadvantage. I'm still too young, and my position could change at any time. She has no reason to befriend me like this. His gaze lowered, his expression darkening slightly. Lucia noticed his hesitation. Would that be uncomfortable for you? She asked softly, watching him carefully. Damian kept staring at her, suspicion clouding his thoughts. I don't know what her intentions are, but since I can't see through her plans, I have no choice but to accept, he reasoned inwardly. Slowly, he reached out and shook her hand. His expression remained serious. Lucia's heart sank slightly. I think it won't be easy to become close with him. He's really suspicious of me, she admitted to herself, releasing his hand gently. Even if I told him I wasn't his enemy, he wouldn't believe me right now. An illegitimate child without a mother. The first thing he must have learned was to doubt everyone around him. But that's fine, she resolved. She smiled again, determined to keep reaching out. You haven't had dinner yet, right? She asked. Right. Damian replied calmly. Would it be all right if we ate together? She asked hopefully. Damian paused, his eyes flicking to her before he answered with a quiet yes, and turned his gaze away. Lucia smiled at his agreement, her heart lightening. Deep inside, she was resolved. She would win him over, little by little, because she believed with certainty that one day her sincerity would reach him. The duel was about to begin, and the tension in the air was clear. Count Solon's knight eyed Roy Croton sharply, trying to provoke him. It seems like you used your connections to become His Highness's personal guard. It's not too late to admit defeat and beg the Count's forgiveness, the knight said boldly, drawing his sword. If you're defeated here, the Crown Prince's honor will be tarnished. So, what was your name again? The knight stiffened as he realized who he was addressing. Oh, Sir Roy Croton, he muttered nervously. But Roy, far from being tense, looked utterly uninterested. He even yawned. Huh? What did you say? He asked, confusing the knight. Sorry, I was just thinking about today's lunch menu, he added with a laugh. What? The knight blurted out, shocked. I should go for the chicken today, right? Roy asked with a straight face, as though the duel were the last thing on his mind. Who cares? The knight snapped angrily. You're insulting the Count again, you wicked crook. A knight's honor doesn't suit someone like you. Draw your sword. Roy, calm as ever, answered smoothly. I'll decide whether or not I want to draw my sword. The knight faltered, confused by Roy's composure. It would be humiliating for your lord if this ended too quickly once I draw my sword. Tack, Roy continued, resting a hand on the sword at his belt. What? The knight stammered. That's why, Roy smirked. If you can force me to draw my sword, I'll admit defeat. He chuckled and gripped the sheathed weapon in his hands. For the sake of fairness, I think I'll need a handicap. The knight ground his teeth in fury. Roy Croton, he shouted, charging at him with all his strength. Meanwhile, at the royal castle in the capital, Jerome shook his head in exasperation. What is that madman thinking? He thought. What's wrong? A voice asked. Fabian, Jerome's younger brother, had appeared in the hallway. It's nothing, Jerome replied, forcing composure as he welcomed him. Why are you here? My master isn't present. Weren't you told about the hunting expedition to clear the native tribes? I know, Fabian answered, but I was given a different order. The young master seems to be here. Jerome froze, worry flickering across his face. For some reason, you don't seem pleased, Fabian observed. Is the madam upset about it? No, that's not it at all, Jerome said quickly. On the contrary, she's too happy about it. She was even prancing around joyfully. That's the problem. His words carried frustration, though he kept most of his thoughts to himself. Even if I told you, you wouldn't understand. You've had it easy, Jerome thought as he looked at Fabian. I was suddenly ordered to bring the family registration papers. Fabian continued, It must be because the young master is here. Family registration papers? Jerome echoed in shock. Did Madame Vivian even agree to that? Changing the subject, Fabian asked lightly, How are they getting along these days? Is His Excellency still acting like a newlywed husband? Watch your mouth, Jerome snapped sternly. Fine, Fabian said with a small laugh. Anyway, nothing unusual has been happening at the capital, right? The capital? Jerome repeated. There's always something going on there, Fabian replied with a grin. Back at the duel, the outcome was clear. Roy had won. Your Highness, what kind of duel is this? This is unjust, Count Solon shouted furiously. He fought without even drawing his sword. This is nonsense. Such dishonor. Prince Hesse, however, could barely contain himself. He really won without drawing his sword. He's even crazier than I thought. That knight may never hold a sword again. I really want to laugh, he thought, ignoring the Count's protest. So noisy, Hesse sighed inwardly, turning to see Roy approaching. Well, what happened to your knight was unfortunate, the Crown Prince said smoothly to Count Solon, but since he lost, you should move on. He smiled as he spoke. What? The Count roared, unable to believe it. Meanwhile, Fabian reflected on the event. Defeating someone with a sheathed sword, the master used to do the same to him. It looks like Roy vented his frustrations on an innocent bystander. Thanks to that, he's now the center of high society's attention. The memory made Fabian laugh inwardly. I cracked up when I first heard it. Jerome, on the other hand, stood silently, observing his brother. Even if I told you, you wouldn't understand. He's so carefree, Jerome thought, studying Fabian's face. Then, Fabian brought up another matter. Oh, I heard a rumor going around lately. What rumor? Jerome asked. It's about the mine that His Excellency offered as his dowry, Fabian said. What? Why would there be a rumor about that? A marriage dowry is a private matter. It should remain between the parties involved. It's common manners not to speak of it, for the sake of each other's honor, Jerome replied, clearly unsettled. What else could it be? It's obvious who started it. The king must have bragged about it, and word spread, Fabian said with a laugh. Of course, Jerome muttered as they continued walking. That rumor spawned all sorts of others, Fabian went on. There's one that says Lady Lucia was so beautiful that no man could resist her at first sight. According to that, Duke Hugo fell for her instantly, gave up the mine, and whisked her away to his domain so no one else could see her. Fabian chuckled, clearly amused. To be honest, she's not really that beautiful. Jerome flinched, glaring at him. What's wrong with our madam? She is beautiful, he said harshly. Fabian studied his brother carefully, sensing the tension. Jerome's face turned red, and he quickly looked away. Do you have a stomachache or something? Fabian teased. It's troublesome when people spread baseless gossip. His Excellency wouldn't be pleased either, Jerome said, masking his embarrassment. Whatever. His Excellency doesn't care about rumors like that. After all these years, do you still not know him? Fabian replied casually. I wonder if that's true. If the rumors involved Madame Vivian, I'm certain he wouldn't ignore them, Jerome thought firmly. Elsewhere in Damian's room, the young master was bent over his books, diligently writing. Young master, dinner is ready, a maid called softly from outside the door. All right, Damian answered, pausing his studies. In the dining room, Damian courteously helped Lucia take her seat before she thanked him with a gentle word. He nodded in reply and then took his own place at the table. Since his arrival, he had been sharing 2 meals each day with the Duchess, lunch and supper. And though their time together outside of those meals was rare, those shared moments had quietly become significant to him. He noticed how little he actually saw of her during the day, except for those meals and the short walks they would take afterward. We simply sit across from each other to eat, and yet somehow, I've come to anticipate these times, he reflected inwardly, his gaze lingering on Lucia as she ate her food. A small accident broke the quiet rhythm of the meal. Damian's cutlery slipped from his hand and fell to the floor. A maid quickly leaned over to pick it up, and this simple gesture left him somewhat perplexed. He thought to himself how unusually careful the servants had been around him lately. Perhaps it was because the Duchess did not hide her affection for him. Not that the servants had ever been rude to him when he was in Roham before leaving for boarding school, but now their attentiveness seemed heightened. Meanwhile, Jerome observed the household with his own thoughts. To him, not much had changed after young Master Damian's return. Roham remained peaceful, as it always had. He watched quietly as Lucia and a maid strolled together outside the castle, reflecting that the Duchess's daily routine had not shifted at all. By day, she roamed the gardens, and by night she could be found in the library, her patterns unchanged. Watching her from the window, Jerome remarked inwardly on the peace of it all before stepping away. Lucia, however, had her own worries. She instructed Jerome to send medicine and fresh flowers along with a letter for Madame Michel, who had injured her ankle. Jerome, ever respectful, accepted the task with a bow. Lucia thought also of her friend Kate, who had written that she was looking after her great-aunt, Countess Falcon, who had fallen unwell. It had been some time since Lucia last received a letter from her, and she felt that she ought to visit them. Kate must be with Madame Michel at that moment, she mused anxiously, hoping both women would recover soon. Lucia then turned to Jerome with a question that carried some hesitation. Did he know what Damian was doing at that moment? Jerome, looking unsettled, explained that the young master spent most of his time on his studies when he was not taking meals or walking with her. He's studying, he told her. This answer surprised Lucia, her eyes widening slightly. She turned to Damian with a smile, praising his studiousness as an admirable trait. Damian, a little flustered, admitted that he had no choice but to study diligently so as not to fall behind his classmates. His reply made him blush, and Lucia thought to herself how cute it was. As they walked together in the garden, Lucia pressed further. Did Damian not get any time off from school? Could he simply leave whenever he wished? Damian explained that permission from the school was required, and even then, only for 30 days. He admitted that he did not know when his grace would return, and so he could not be certain if he would be back within the allowed time. The thought clearly worried him, and Lucia, too, grew uneasy at his words. Then he added in a quiet voice that if the Terran household intervened, the rule would not apply to him, but if he stayed any longer, the semester would be ruined. The weight of his disappointment carried into Lucia as well. She stepped closer and asked him seriously why he never addressed the Duke as father. Had he been told not to? Damian, frightened by her earnestness, shook his head and said no. He admitted instead that he simply thought the Duke would dislike being called that. Lucia was startled and flustered by his assumption. Why would you think that? Are you sure it's not just your assumption? She asked, her voice calm but firm. She encouraged him to call the Duke father, assuring him he would not be displeased. Pointed out something else. Damian had never once called her by name. She knew he was deliberately avoiding it, and she reminded him that he mustn't go back to addressing her as Your Grace. Giving him a pointed look, she pressed him to call her Lucia, since she called him by his name. Damian, sweating nervously, said he had never intended to call her Your Grace again. Still, when she leaned in with a gentle smile and urged him to say her name, he looked at her coldly and kept silent. Then at last, in a soft voice, he said, "Okay," which stunned her. Yet despite her surprise, it made her happy. Elsewhere, Lucia's personal doctor, Anna, struggled with a stack of books. "It's so heavy, I should have made more than one trip," she muttered to herself as she set them down. She had been combing through bookstores for anything on medicinal herbs, desperately seeking a cure for the Duchess. She feared that even this new collection of books might not yield an answer, but she pressed on. "I must find a cure for her grace," she resolved inwardly. Her concentration was broken by a loud noise nearby. Curious, she turned and saw a woman from the castle kitchen staff, Dorothy, speaking with a man she did not recognize. She was shocked at how courteously Dorothy treated him, even though he did not appear to be unimportant. Who was he? Anna asked Dorothy's companion, who seemed surprised that Anna had never seen him before. The woman explained coldly that he was always away, and then revealed that he was none other than the Terran family's physician. Anna was startled. She had thought she was the only physician serving the Duchess. Why had no one told her about him? The woman added that the Duke wanted nothing to do with this man, which calmed Anna slightly but left her deeply curious. Later, Anna approached the man herself. "Hello, would you happen to be Sir Philip? My name is Anna. I am the Duchess's physician," she introduced herself. Philip asked her to simply call him by his name, and she did the same in return. He welcomed her inside and offered her tea. From the gossip she heard, he rarely stayed in Roham, had disappeared for years, and when he did return, he would only stay briefly before leaving again. He explained modestly that as a doctor, he simply helped when people needed him. Anna listened intently. She learned from another woman that Philip had once saved her child when all hope had been lost, and that his abilities were respected. Rumors of malpractice were unfounded. His skills were beyond doubt. Anna found herself admiring him. Unlike most practitioners, whose knowledge was narrow, Philip seemed well-versed in every area of medicine. He spoke eloquently, carried himself with quiet dignity, and his knowledge was unmatched. She thought to herself that she would never be as skilled as him, yet she also learned troubling details. Dorothy had told her that though Philip was the Terran family physician, the Duke had ordered him removed from the castle. Still, his quarters within the castle remained untouched, which made little sense. Why would such a gifted doctor be kept at a distance, yet not dismissed entirely? The contradiction gnawed at her. Anna realized that Philip might hold insight into the Duchess's mysterious condition. But she hesitated. Her Grace's illness was a sensitive matter, not easily spoken of, especially given her status as the Duchess. She decided she could not confide in him yet. Rising to leave, she thanked him for his time, keeping her thoughts to herself. Back at the castle, a servant approached Anna, saying that Jerome wished to see her. Shocked, she followed to the library, where Jerome revealed that he knew she had met Philip. Anna bristled, accusing him of spying, but Jerome smiled and clarified that it was Philip they were watching. The Duke had been displeased with Philip's attempt to enter the castle, so Jerome had placed more eyes on him. Jerome did not forbid Anna from meeting Philip, nor did he demand details of their conversations. But he gave her a strict warning. Under no circumstances was Philip to meet the Duchess, nor was Anna to mention him to her. This was a direct order from the Duke. Anna was stunned. She protested inwardly, knowing Philip was highly skilled, but kept her composure. If she was still allowed to consult with him, could she at least seek his opinion on the Duchess's condition? Jerome thought carefully. The Duke had never forbidden Philip from practicing medicine outside the castle, so it could be permitted. But Jerome emphasized that the Duchess must believe Anna alone was searching for her cure. Anna agreed quietly, bowing in respect. Meanwhile, outside the castle, Lucia took a walk in the fresh air. From a distance, a familiar voice called her name. Lucia. She turned, and her face lit with a bright smile when she saw who it was. "Kate," she exclaimed warmly, greeting the beautiful lady who approached, a woman who carried herself with the elegance of a duchess.
Thank you for watching this episode of our manhwa recap. We hope you enjoyed diving into the world of this story with us. If you loved the content, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more amazing manhwa recaps. See you in the next episode.